Hey guys, we're going to be looking at a game by WithNoEyesOpen playing Draven. We watched him play Corky a little while back and just gave him a little couple notes, and now we're going to see how he's improved since then. This is his first ranked game, he says, and we just want to see how he does. Both teams have an unusual setup. Uh, Draven's team has the Nidalee support, it looks like, and the Ashe perhaps mid, which is a strange setup. The other team has Malphite top and what looks to be Israel Zera or Israel Talon bottom. So either way, we're going to see an interesting setup from the other team. We'll see that in this game, Draven starts with the Boots 3-pot, which is one of the things I mentioned last time, that Boots 3-pot is generally a better start than the Doran's Blade, unless you have an extremely high sustain support. And Nidalee does have the heal, but the heal is not a very large heal. It's more of a utility heal because it gives the attack speed. So it's good to start with Boots 3-pot even with a champion that has a small heal like that or an Alistar. Unfortunately, the Nidalee did not bring any wards to lane, so Draven needs to be a bit more careful than he would normally have to be, because the jungler could gank them without them being able to see it coming. At this point, we would want to see Draven just focusing on the last hits a bit more, and just really focusing on getting these early ones. Notice that he's taking a lot of CC from Ezreal, and he's positioned up rather far. We'll notice that the Ezreal makes a huge mistake. When Ezreal attacked the Draven, Ezreal got the creep aggro, and then when Draven kited him backwards, Ezreal took a huge amount of damage, which allowed Draven to come out about even in that trade, even though Ezreal had got the large amount of initial damage onto him. So now that we see Draven just get more into the last hitting, he's just working on that, which is exactly what he should be doing. The Nidalee heal, even though it's not very large, will allow him to out-sustain the Ezreal. Ezreal has to use his pots if he wants to heal, and Draven will have a small amount of Nidalee heal, which will also help very much in the fight when he gets the extra attack speed. Now right here, just Draven needs to be a little bit more careful not to take any minion damage, especially from the siege minions, and just to not stop the wave at all. But he's doing a much better job of letting the lane push than in the last game, and he's doing a good job of setting the lane up to help him get last hits under the tower. He's coming a bit far up, which is allowing Ezreal to harass him. If he just stands back where he is now, it's a lot easier for him to just come up and get the last hits. One thing to note is it's almost always best to focus on the creeps that are being targeted by the tower, because those are the ones that are going to die the soonest, which means you'll have the least chance to last hit them. So if you focus on those, you can make sure to not let the tower kill any creeps before you've had the chance to last hit them, which is something that you definitely want to be able to do as the AD carry. We'll notice that both Draven and Ezreal's pots are all gone, and now the Nidalee sustain will help Draven stay ahead of the HP battle. Ezreal makes a huge mistake by using his flash offensively when they don't have adequate ward coverage, and Gangplank's able to come in, and Draven's able to take down the Ezreal with the high damage from his spinning axes. It's good right here that they chase onto the Malphite and are able to get the kill using Draven's spinning axes and ignite. Right now he's pushing the wave up here, which is a pretty good move, because if he can get the wave to the tower, he'll be able to deny Ez XP and gold. So he should really make it a priority right now to be pushing to the tower and as soon as it hits the tower, he wants to go back and buy. Especially in an AD lane, it's very important to push your advantage when you get a couple kills or when you get your creep farm. Buying boots, a Doran's, and a ward. Oh, it's Doran's, yes, of course. And a couple pots. Great buy, excellent buy. Great to buy the ward, knowing that your support hasn't been warding, and knowing that you're at an advantage, and that the best way for the enemy to come back would be to gank you. So great buy. And buying the pots, even though you have the heal, is great. They sell back at only a loss of 10 gold. Now you're getting a little bit aggressive on the Ezreal. Note that they have a large amount of creeps, which will push into your tower. So that's not really the best time to fight. If you let the creeps push up, you can last hit some of them, and then you can fight when they don't have as much creep support, and when you're at a better position to escape if you're losing the fight, or chase if you're winning. Fighting near your own tower is almost always best because it allows you to extend fights that you're winning and shorten fights that you're losing by getting to your own tower. Now Draven's doing great damage to the Ezreal, but it has to be noted that he's missing last hits and getting harassed very heavily by the creeps. So that's something you want to be cautious of, especially when you're at your own tower and there's a large buildup of creeps. It's tempting to go onto the enemies, but you miss a lot of last hits, and the enemy creeps will start firing on you, which could be extremely damaging if you do not have a lot of armor and if it's early in the game. We'll check the last hit count. So Ezreal's at 22 and Draven's at 24. Now these numbers are a bit low for this point in the game for AD carries, but it's good that Draven is making sure to stay ahead of the Ezreal. And a lot of this is just coming down to mechanical ability rather than the knowledge. So just more practice is going to be required just to get the last hitting down. And it's different with every character. So if someone's not as experienced with Draven, especially a character who has a pretty interesting skill set, it's going to be a little bit tougher to get the last hits right off the bat. But it's good that you're keeping the focus on that. Another thing is right now you're kind of falling into the auto attack pattern. The thing about auto attacking is not only does it push the lane, but it means that your auto attack is on cooldown when you need to last hit, which makes it more difficult. People don't really think about auto attacks having a cooldown, but it's really kind of a spell with a very short cooldown, and you always want to have that up to be able to get the last hits. And if you're in the middle of an animation, you can't do it on another creep or even the same creep to get the last hit. Now unfortunately Nidalee's low health, which you'll see is allowing Malphite to control the bush and zone Draven a little bit. This is always something that as a bottom lane you need to be concerned about, is that if you fall at low health, the enemy can start to zone you pretty heavily by using the bushes. The way to avoid that is to go back to base and get higher health or to heal up, and that will allow you to fight them if they try to zone you and push them out of those bushes. And retaining bush control is extremely important as a bottom lane. Gangplank comes in for another gank, but it appears that this time it may have been warded, so that even though Gangplank is able to lay down his ult, Malphite's able to get out relatively easily. And we'll see that Alistar's coming in for the counter gank. In this situation, Draven really needs to be running as he's attacking. He stands still and lets Alistar hit him back towards the tower. And in this situation, he needs to be helping the fight. He can still help the fight by staying back. He should be attacking the Alistar, who's attacking his own Nidalee. It's always tempting to chase, but it's almost always better to stay back and help your team. And even if you think you can get more kills by chasing, keeping your teammates alive and getting the short kills is going to put you further ahead in the course of the game. If Draven were to kill the Malphite and let the Nidalee die there, that would have been a 1-for-1, but coming back to kill the Alistar assured him the short kill. and helped him stay ahead in this lane where he's 301. Right now is kind of a tricky point in buying. 1200 is kind of an awkward number because it's not enough for the BF sword, and it's more than just a Doran's blade. Oftentimes you can go with a Doran's and a Vamp Scepter is a reasonable buy at this point. Getting the other ward was a very good idea to be able to check for these ganks. Pickaxe is also an option, which will build towards your Infinity Edge, and it might set you back on the BF sword, but it's something that gives you a good amount of damage now and will help push your advantage. So if you're not dying in lane, that's certainly a good option. Nidalee's going a little bit aggressive here, but she'll be able to heal up, whereas Malphite and Ezreal won't. So that's a pretty good trade to do, especially now that she has a blue buff. She can heal a lot more often than the enemy team can throw out spells because she has the mana and the cooldowns. Now we'll notice that both the enemies are low. This is a good time for Nidalee to be zoning them. Draven can certainly help, but Draven really wants to focus on the last hits. Now that we see Alistar mid, unfortunately Nidalee goes back, which doesn't allow Draven to pressure. But that would have been a great time to pressure the enemies because they were under their tower. Getting harassed when the enemy is under the tower is a great thing as an AD. If you can run in and auto attack and run out without taking the tower damage, you can force the enemy to choose between last hitting and harassing you back. If they choose to harass you back, you end up trading. If they choose to last hit, you end up getting free damage on them. So you force them to choose between two things, and they're unable to do both, which is exactly what you want to be doing against them. So we'll see that Nidalee's back, and now we'd expect to see them zone, which is exactly what they're doing. Nidalee staying behind, and Draven staying further up front than he normally would, because he knows that his high damage can really kill Ezreal very quickly. You'll notice now that they don't have any wards, which means that they can't continue with the aggressive play, which is why it's always best to get a fair amount of wards. We noticed that he bought one when he went back, but if he had bought more, he would be more able to play aggressively, and he could really push the advantage. Now notice that Draven was initiated on by the enemies when Nidalee wasn't here and was almost killed because of it. Just always be cautious that when your support goes somewhere to ward or to gank other lanes, if they're an aggressive support like you'll see a Taric or Alistar do occasionally, that you need to play more safely, especially if they show themselves somewhere else. A good bottom lane will initiate on you as soon as your support shows somewhere else, knowing that you're 1v2, and that can really cause you to be bursted down very quickly, especially with a burstier champion like Malphite playing as support. Now we'll see that Draven wants to be able to go back and get his BF sword, but he's pushed to his tower, and it looks like he has a gank coming in, so we'll see them try to get a kill before Draven goes back. Unfortunately, they get counter-ganked by the Zera, who does a very large amount of burst damage. They could have seen the Zera come through their ward and backed off a bit earlier, but that's something that Draven realizes in chat. Yes, Gangplank mentions that they probably should have gone a bit earlier. It's good to initiate at the same time as your jungler, not let them go in by themselves before you, because then the enemies can try to get a lot of burst on them before the fight starts, or just run away before you ever become part of the fight, which means the gank will just be ineffective or turned around by the enemy. So just be sure to try to get in as close to the same time as your jungler does without giving away the gank. So it's something you have to learn how to balance. It's something that depends on how your enemy is reacting to your aggression. But if you see them not reacting very much, that's a very good time to go in as soon as your jungler gets there and just bait them into a fight that your jungler can help you clean up afterwards. Now notice that they're playing very aggressively without a ward, and they even dive. But Zera is here, and Zera is pretty strong. And AP mid is generally going to be very strong against a AD, especially early on, or mostly through the mid game, when their burst is going to be enough to kill an AD who doesn't have any defensive items. We'll see that the only defensive item Draven has right now is the Doran's Blade that gives him any type of defense, and that allows him to be easily bursted by the Ezreal spells in the Zera. So it's really, really important to be cautious of the enemy mids when you're playing an AD carry early on. We'll see that Draven buys a dagger here, which isn't the greatest of choices at this moment because he should be focusing on finishing his IE. Finishing an IE gives you a huge damage boost and is going to be very important, whereas the dagger has a small damage increase from the extra attack speed at the moment. And although it will help you build into your Phantom Dancer later, it's not important that you rush that. And it fills up your slots, so he couldn't buy a ward, which is something that he should be trying to keep on him if Nidalee's not going to ward, so that he can protect himself while he safely farms. He finishes the Zeal here instead of finishing up the IE, which is probably a bit of a mistake. Finishing the IE would just give him a greater damage boost at this moment, because the completing an item, the recipe is generally one of the more efficient things in the game. Completed items give you huge stat increases or huge powerful abilities on items like Rylai's that don't have a stat increase associated with a huge stat increase associated with it. But something like IE, where you get the additional crit damage, is going to give you an enormous DPS boost and is important to finish as quickly as possible. So although the Zeal does stack multiplicatively with the damage items he bought, this is a situation where finishing that IE and then going to the Zeal would have probably been the best option. But luckily now he's able to do both. And you notice that he picked up a Vamp Scepter, which will later build into a Bloodthirster, but now just gives him the sustain that is important because he doesn't have very many Dorans, and because as you move towards later, lifesteal becomes more important in keeping you up in sustained fights. If you can position yourself well enough to survive the burst, lifesteal is what makes an AD carry so powerful. And you'll notice that the enemy surrenders. So notice this is a much better game. Notice that his pushing of the lane was much, much better in this game, and that his spell usage was much more controlled, perhaps because Draven is not as much of a caster as Corki was, but we'll notice that he still didn't throw out his knock away, he didn't throw out his ult at random times, and he was able to always have mana and always be doing the effective chasing with his speed and his spinning axes that allowed him to get many kills in lane. And he was warding up, even though his support wasn't doing that as much. Just a couple things to think about: fighting when there's creeps around, and just being cautious of when you can initiate on fights and when you can get your enemies to initiate and take a lot of your own creep damage. And another thing is to harass enemies under tower, which you can only do if you ward up, which you did well this game, but could do a bit more, and would be helped if you had a little bit more support from your support player. But excellent game. I'm glad that you learned a couple things, and you hopefully improved a little bit. And good luck in the rest of your rank games.